We got Feed Me Fridays. We're going to Island Girl Coffee and Quenchers for Feed Me Fridays with our gangs over at Devondale Milk. And we've also got a sneak peek of the One Micronesia podcast coming up. Let's get political. Political. Gonna get political. Because it's election. Let's bring on Peter Santos here. He's I don't know, are you the only one that's in Responsible Guam, the Responsible Guam PAC? Well, just good morning, Peter. Thank you.
Buenas, Chris. Hey, ko para ta fanfinut samora, pagus sa mes samoro.
We might have some problems with our audience, but Pete, Responsible Guam PAC, is that you or?
Yeah, it's me. I filed the ethics complaint. I formed the PAC. There are some unnamed or anonymous members, and I'll explain why in a minute. But first of all, because it's Mes tomorrow and it's Lent, and in order to make a dig at Paul Zerzan, I've decided to give up Lent for red rice. Last year I gave up Lent for beer, and the year before that I gave up Lent for steak.
I'm going to sort that out. So you gave up Lent for red rice. I got it. I need to see the PowerPoint on that. Peter, can we just, Pete, if we could just start with the ethics complaint. I mean, everybody knows you've been a very vocal critic of the congressman. You filed an ethics complaint. Can you give us just more info on that? Was this something you filed with locally, or was that with the Office of Congressional Ethics?
That's with the Office of Congressional Ethics. Okay. You know, a lot of people talk about, the local government does it too, whatever. However, he's a federal official, and so he has different rules that apply to him, and he skirts the line very close, and I believe it's an actionable complaint about what he did with that set of advertisements, right? The way it was very strongly suggestive of him, giving him praise for securing federal funds, which he had nothing to do with. And that goes part and parcel with why I formed the PAC. You know, it's an honest alternative to the narratives that are being pushed by him and others. So what the PAC is going to be, unless you want to go into further detail about the ethics complaint.
Let's just start with the ethics thing. So, Pete, with this ethics complaint, from what I read of it, you're basically alleging that these are the commercials. Thank you for the federal. Thank you for the federal. These commercials are the ones you're talking about. And you're basically alleging that these advertisements violated congressional rules because they were advertised after a certain date, right? Is that what you're alleging?
No, what it is there's an authorization, an exception that was made that official funds could be used to make PSAs, public service announcements, about COVID-related programs. And so he skirts the line. This is a thank you. It's not really a public service announcement. And what is a thank you for? It's to garner favor, right? It's to garner support.
Right.
It's not saying, hey, this is your congressman. This is what we've got. This is what is available to you. Contact me. He does that sort of in the end, you know. You have any questions, contact your congressman's office. Yeah. Well, the problem is when you try to call that. Have you ever tried to call that number, Chris?
It's been a minute, Pete.
And the other problem is, remember the veterans action group that he supposedly was supposed to form?
The Congressional Veterans Advisory Committee. Yes.
Yeah, that was all fake too, right? So fake phone number, fake veterans action group. And you know, you touched on it. He's courting some general officers. You know why? Because he's extremely short when it comes to supporting the veterans. He made a bunch of promises that he delivered zero on. And so he knows he's burned his bridges with the veterans. The veterans have been vocal. If you ever listened to the veteran talk shows on Guam, or if you ever talked to any of the veteran groups, they're extremely upset with Michael San Nicolas.
Yeah, we've had him on the show, Pete. But I just want to go back to this ethics complaint because this is something that I actually looked into this. And it was at the prompting of, not the prompting, but it was Democrats. And they were like, hey, Chris, you should look into this because Congressman, he's putting out these ads and they're political and yada, yada. So I actually looked into this, Peter, and the process for this is before Congressman Michael San Nicolas can run any ad that says, thank you for the federal funds, they have to approve it, is what I understand.
Right. And that will be pretty much a rubber stamp. And who approves it, right? It's they themselves. But then when something like that gets rubber stamped,
there's a franking office that they have to submit this stuff to, and they approve it. So that's why when I looked into these allegations that were raised by the Democrats in the last election, just because I wanted to vet it and verify it, it was almost like a nothing burger. And so I get what you're trying to complain about, but the way I see it, it is what it is. It's a gray area where you have, the Governor Lou taking credit for these federal funds, but you don't seem to have an issue with that.
Well, let's be honest about it, right?
Yes, let's.
So we got the federal funds, first of all, not in any part due to him. It just came to us as a package. And who is the one working on the ground to make these programs run? It's not the federal government. It's the locals, right? The locals had to work and get these programs stood up. So in that sense, they deserve that credit that they ran the program, they stood up the program, they ran it. Although the money didn't come from them, it came from the federal government. So they owe credit to the federal government, which they give, but they also deserve credit for standing up and running the programs, and what was going on while they were trying to stand up. They were getting criticized and interfered with by the congressman, making accusations. And so they had to kind of stop what they were doing and say, hold a minute. Let us explain to the congressman, because he doesn't seem to understand. He's a sitting congressman, but he doesn't seem to understand how this works. And so what he did was he detracted and he, delayed the programs from getting launched because he was making a bunch of noise because he didn't understand what was going on. He didn't understand how it worked.
Pete, though, just looking at how this looks, the optics of it, right? It looks like you're going to be doing Adeloop's dirty work and attacking the congressman from the back while they kind of run their. Because
it's equal.
You just backflip so hard trying to say that it's okay for the governor to take credit for the federal funds, but not the congressman, right? Well, I think they should both just. I don't think they. Well, anyway, go ahead.
Right. Let's think about this pragmatically, right? Like I said, he's sitting over there taking credit for stuff that he had no involvement in. And then the locals, they actually were the ones that did the work, put in the elbow grease, and with no help from him except for interference. And so the locals should and have given the federal government credit, but they also did work. Unlike the congressman, didn't do any work.
So, Pete, I guess my next question is, so with the Responsible Guam PAC, are you trying to use this political action committee to promote a responsible Guam, or is just the sole function of the committee to campaign against Congressman San Nicolas?
Well, let me explain the PAC, right? So, that I was very vocal about him the last election. And the reason why, and the history, I'll give you my personal history. When he started Responsible Guam and ran as a Guam senator, I loved it. I backed it. I supported it. I thought the idea was great. He was going to be anti-corruption and all this and that. But then he lost my support when I saw how he performed in the legislature, and he just turned out to be like every other senator who had special interests in mind. And then he lost my support further when I saw how he fell on certain issues that were important to Guam, right? And so he lost my support at that time. I wasn't even vocal about it. I was just like, okay, I'm not going to vote for this guy anymore. But then, he had all his controversies with accepting illegal donations and violating House rules by having an affair with a staffer and all that. And so to me, Chris, that was an insult to the people of Guam, right? You run on a platform of integrity, anti-corruption, so on and so forth, and you turn around and your hands are dirty. And so to me, it kind of struck a personal chord, you know? And people ask, why am I so obsessed with that? It's not an obsession, it's disdain. You know, when someone touts, you know, honesty, integrity, results, and then you get exactly opposite, no results, no honesty, no integrity, and then you continue to push that narrative, and I see people eat it up, you know, to me, it's bothersome. Yeah. I don't like, there's a saying, right? Tizahu dakuns and tizao at sibao. Right. I don't like liars and I don't like corruption.
Right. But it kind of sounds like you're describing every politician. That's just what they do, bro. They talk out of one side of their mouth and then they do other things out of the other. I mean, I'm just saying, is there any politician other than Congressman Mike San Nicolas that you have, you know, these not issues? And I get it.
This PAC is not just for Michael San Nicolas. Okay. You know, it's equal opportunity. It's going to also be, I'm going to go after James Moylan because of the same thing. He has different issues, although it's also problematic to the people of Guam, right? James Moylan got PICA's best senator, right? For what? He's the most inefficient senator. He's just a headline grabber. He doesn't really he has no results. You know, and the legislation that he's introduced have all been half-baked. You know, he's the one that introduced legislation to stop any political candidate from using federal funds, you know, for advertising. Well, his best buddy, Michael San Nicolas, is guilty of that. He introduced legislation to punish people who enforce taxes that have not been approved by the people. Well, it was pointed out to him that he himself is guilty of that. So he withdrew that bill, right? So it's just, he's just doesn't have a grasp on how basic government works. And he doesn't seem to be introducing bills that make sense. And so, although he grabs a lot of headlines, it's a lot of fluff with no results. He's like two peas in a pod with Michael San Nicolas, right? And so Michael San Nicolas is going to support him for the congressional run, you know, so that James Moylan can rent his house in D.C. because Mike just bought a house in D.C., right? And so they already have a gentleman's agreement that James Moylan will rent his house if he wins.
Pete, we're getting some comments here. Pete is being biased. Sounds personal. How do you respond to those comments? Someone woke up on the wrong side of the bed. I make no
bones about it. I will give him honest credit, right? When he does anything that produces results, I will give him honest credit. But unfortunately, Chris, I don't see anything that he's actually done. All of his predecessors have had 2 to 3 bills enacted into law during each of their terms. He's had none. You can't really count the technical correction bill, which was half a page and 3 sentences long. I mean, and that was just tying up the bow on the work that his 2 predecessors had done. But getting back to the PAC is not going to be just focused on Michael San Nicolas and James Moylan. It's going to be equal opportunity. It's going to be anybody who is running for office. You know, the reason why I wanted to form this,
Anybody?
Yeah, anybody, even the governor, all the senators, the public auditor, the AG, right? There'll be stuff in there, you know, sort of giving him a report card. Honestly.
Right, yeah. So I guess here's a random one I got on a chat here. What about like the vice speaker? You know, there was a little controversy that, you know, she was gone for 6 months and, but do you have issues with that? Do you think that that's okay?
Well, you know, if you got into a bad wreck and had 16 stitches in your head and you were kept by the doctor there to treat you, and then you're also, oh, by the way, there to assist your spouse who is waiting for a critical operation. And oh, by the way, what difference does it make if all your hearings are by Zoom, whether or not you're on Hessler Street or Poly Roman Street or, San Dionisio Street, Umatec, or Main Street, Arizona, right? Main Street, Tempe, Arizona. It doesn't matter if you're on Zoom. I go to hearings all the time and it's on Zoom. I'm on Zoom right now. We're getting the work done. So, and her staff is there. So, I just think that was insensitive of Tello Taidegui to call that out without actually thinking about it. A lot of people just open mouth and insert foot. I mean, even her own party came out and criticized her for raising that issue, right? Is that not true?
Yeah, of course they did. They've actually come out a few times and criticized her for raising different issues. That some would argue that means there's a split in the party.
Right, but so everyone is going to be fair game in the PAC. And what it is, Chris, it's an honest alternative to the talking head like Ken Leon Guerrero, who talks without knowing what he's talking about, makes assertions and conspiracy theories without supporting them, right? And people, it has legs. It has legs. It grows legs and it runs. And I'm like, why do the public believe this mumbo jumbo? So the purpose is to give an honest alternative. That's the touchstone of the PAC. Another way or another voice in the conversation than just what Michael San Nicolas pushes out on social media. I see a lot of stuff that's being, work that's being done by other delegates. Yet all I know is that last week he had Tanala Cutney for lunch, right? And let's talk about access to people that have issues with the federal government. When's the last time he's held an open forum or a town hall meeting or met with anybody? We don't know if he's here on Guam or not. How do we know he's on Guam? Only when he appears on Candid News all of a sudden.
We actually had another comment here, Pete. Are you going to keep Governor Liu accountable?
Yes, absolutely. In
what ways do you think the gov needs to be held accountable?
Well, the problem is, to me, what I see from where I sit. She has directors and administrators that have really stepped on it. And has she held them accountable? For the most part, yes, right? But when someone screws up, look at what happened to Buddy Orsini recently, right? He was Nix 9 and never mind, right? I don't know where he's going. The governor, being governor is hard. I worked for generals, and generals have a lot of leaders under them, right? And you have people that are supposed to work and do their jobs. And if they don't, if they screw up, then you got to can them. You got to, send them on to the next chapter of their life. And so I see her as sort of like that. She's the chief executive. She has all these generals and colonels under her, so to speak, right? And they're supposed to perform. And if you don't perform, then you got to go. And if you screw up, then you got to be held accountable, right?
Yeah. Like Jack Hattig?
I'm sorry?
Like Jack Hattig?
Right. Yeah. So, aside from missteps and mishaps, personal, I guess, for some of the people in the administration, personal indiscretions or whatever, for the most part, the government has been functioning, right? We yeah, we can disagree with some of the mandates and some of the decisions on businesses, but at the end of the day, right, this is a new and emerging issue that we're dealing with. It's not like a typhoon. Once we have a typhoon, Chris, everybody knows what to do. Everybody knows where to go, who to, man their station, and what resources to pull upon from the federal government, what shelters need to get ready, all the evacuation plans, all that is ingrained. It is in our muscle memory. We've never had a pandemic on Guam under our current government structure, right? In 1918, they had the Spanish flu, but that was different times, right? And we lost half the population in 1918. But so we're working on the website. We're going to launch that together with our social media presence. And have you ever been on GulfTrack?
Yeah. Pete, so with the PAC though, what do you have fundraisers, or how do you get the money to do it? Is it your own money?
Well, right now we're unfunded. We're just like-minded people that want to put out there an honest alternative, right? When I started becoming vocal after I left the prosecution office, because I couldn't, like military members, right? When I was in prosecution, I couldn't talk about people. I always talked about issues. I only talked about issues when I was still up at prosecution. I would call into the radio station or comment on the different social media about issues. And I was never really supposed to talk about people. But then when I left prosecution, I was no longer bound by that. Okay, so what the website and the social media is going to do, it's going to have sort of like a scorecard or a place for information on all incumbents and people that are seeking political office, right? It's going to be like a one-stop area, because right now, everywhere else, people get their information from everywhere else, right? And there's going to be an ability for people to input information, to comment, right? It's going to be transparent. The website is going to have links to point to source documents for the information. And then it's just going to be a place for people to be able to look and see, information about their elected leaders and their, elected officials. A lot of people can't be really called leaders, right? They're elected officials and those who are seeking to become elected officials. So it'll have a sort of like a feel like GulfTrack, but it'll also have other features as well.
Yeah, guys, GulfTrack, it's this website. You could go on to GulfTrack and you can actually track the performance. They use a bunch of different metrics like attendance and bills introduced and other factors to give you kind of like a tracking of your government officials. Pete, so you mentioned you left prosecution. Where are you working now, and are you cool? Are you under mini hatch? Are you able to do this PAC thing?
Yeah, so I'm a criminal defense attorney. So what I do doesn't really touch on politics.
I see. So you're not in Guam anymore?
I'm sorry?
Are you still in the government of Guam, or?
Yes, under the alternate public defender.
Okay. So
and I cleared this with all my bosses.
I see.
Right? Chris, I've been around. You and I know each other back from when I was in GPD.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I think you interviewed me a couple of times, but I've been around the block, so I know what I'm doing, and what do you call it? There's no conflict.
Okay.
There's no conflict with what I'm doing, and I don't, ever attribute where I work to what I'm doing on my political advocacy,
right.
And it's not partisan, right? So that's why I said that everyone's open game. The PAC was filed. We're nonpartisan. We're independent, so to speak. So anyone is open game. We're going to go after or not go after, that's not the right word. We're going to fill information on the website for people to see, on all sides, Republicans, Democrats, and on all offices.
Right on. Pete, just who is in the PAC? Because I know when we started, you mentioned that some people want to stay anonymous.
So when I started becoming vocal, people would text me and message me, hey, I like what you're doing. I like what you're saying, because what's the alternative, right? We have the very biased Candid News, who always praises Michael San Nicolas, but yet completely is silent on any of the problematic issues he has. And so that's why I'm saying we need to create an honest alternative. So there are some other lawyers, right, who choose to remain anonymous, who have pledged to donate. There are some politicians on both sides, because I have friends both on the Republican and the Democrat side. I have never been officially affiliated with any of the parties, right? If you notice, when I picked up the packet to go to possibly think about running for Congress, I put Republican.
So
right?
You're not running for Congress anymore, Pete?
I can't, not with this PAC. This PAC takes me out of the running. You can't have a PAC as well as run. So that effectively ceases my potential for running. But the reason why I put Republican, because people that know me that I'm conservative. Yeah, I may joke, I may make fun of things, and people think, oh, he's probably a liberal because he's a joker, right? But no, I'm a fiscal conservative. That's why I have problems with James Moylan. He claims to be a Republican, yet he wants to give everybody free money. He wants to drop food to your house. He doesn't want people to be self-sufficient. I understand people are hurting, but, don't give them fish. Teach them how to fish. Right?
But we have all this fish from the federal government, though. We have to give it away before it goes rotten.
That's true. That's true. But at the end of the day, we need to divvy that out correctly and responsibly. And, why don't we make people earn that money? I've never got stimulated with any of the money, so I'm an unstimulated person, but I don't complain about that. Have you been stimulated, Chris?
Yes, many times, Pete. I'm actually very stimulated right now with this conversation. Pete, thank you for your time. I'm at the top of the hour. We got to go, but there's just a bunch of comments. You definitely struck a chord here this morning. I thank you for that.
And thank you for that, Chris. And that's the purpose. That's right, the whole purpose of this, right?
Right.
To stir up discussion, good or bad or indifferent. We just have to have that discussion.
Let's talk about it, Pete. Thank you.
Está.
Okay, there you go, Peter Santos. Let's go through some of the comments here, guys. It was definitely going off, both on my WhatsApp. Frank the Crank comments here. Conspiracy